No one noticed her at first. That was the point. Among the swarm of starport travelers, with her compact frame and calm demeanor, she was just another face. Short, slim, barely armored, no weapons visible. She moved like someone who had walked these halls 1,000 times, even though no one could recall seeing her before. No insignia, no escort, no ID tags blinking on her collar. She registered on no official logs. But she moved with purpose. The outer colonies didn't expect threats to walk in with a smile. The guard at Checkpoint Delta gave her a glance, then looked away. He'd learn later why that was a mistake, if he survived. For now, she passed through the scanners, untouched, undetected. She carried nothing. That was true in a literal sense. What no one factored was what followed her a few steps behind. On the outer deck of the Atrix Spire, a cargo bay registered a malfunction. A false reading, they assumed. Power surge. Mechanical error. Tech teams dispatched lazily. But the temperature dropped by 8 degrees in 30 seconds. Magnetic locks shorted. Motion detectors went blind. The guards outside the sealed hangar joked about ghosts until the bulkhead folded inward like wet paper, silent and surgical. The first sound came when the weight hit the deck. Over 900 kilograms of metal, sensors, and death. 9 feet tall, built from forbidden alloys, bristling with outdated yet illegal weapons tech. The machine didn't roar. It didn't need to. One step echoed across the reinforced floor like a gavel. It had no designation, no flags. Only a symbol burned into its upper chassis, a crescent over a black slash. The mark of a unit erased from military records decades ago. Security responded too late. By the time a response squad arrived, the hangar was empty, except for the silence and the hollowed-out remnants of the floor. The machine had moved underground, unnoticed. It didn't need doors. It made them. Back in the civilian atrium, the girl moved toward the central core, passing civilians who never looked twice. She stopped only once, at a vendor stall, and asked for directions. The merchant blinked at her, hesitated, then gave the wrong directions. That was his last conscious moment. By the time he collapsed behind the counter, her neural relay had already synced with a transmission deep below the station. A single burst pinged through secure comms. 2 decks down, the death machine paused, then rerouted. Her name wasn't important. Names weren't real in places like this. What mattered was what she carried. Not in her hands, but in her mind. Encoded memories, injected through military-grade mind prints, forged in black site labs no longer recognized by any central government. She had been human, once. Mostly. The memories of that person still flickered sometimes. Dusty, irrelevant. She had a purpose now. The central spire controlled traffic lanes, orbital weapons, atmospheric management, and deep space communications. The spire was considered unbreachable. It was designed to withstand bombardment from war-class cruisers. It was supposed to be untouchable. Until she reached it. The first resistance came from a corporate private force. 10 mercs in carbon weave armor, standard loadouts, overconfident and underbriefed. They called out for her to halt. She didn't. One tried to grab her. His hand never closed. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The others hesitated. That pause sealed their fate. She didn't fight like a human. She moved before they fired, predicting vectors by calculating breathing rhythms and muscle flex. 2 seconds later, all 10 were down, pulse check alive, but some would never walk again. The camera footage went blank 10 seconds after she entered the spire's perimeter. Someone tried to lock the elevators. The doors still opened for her. Her body carried back doors no firewall could anticipate. She'd been wired at the genetic level, every cell tuned to bypass biometric locks, her blood a master key to dead technologies. Meanwhile, the machine reached the subgrid, a network of maintenance tunnels beneath the civilian sectors. It didn't crawl. It didn't run. It moved, fluid and terrifying, its steps silent thanks to kinetic dispersal pads on its feet. Anyone who saw it didn't live to tell the story. It didn't kill unnecessarily, but it had no issue doing so. The machine wasn't there to protect her. It was her tool, nothing more. It responded to her neural pulses, no voice required, no delay. It didn't question. It obeyed. That's what made it perfect. That's what made her unstoppable. Inside the control center, senior techs were already panicking. Emergency lockdowns failed. Automated drones deployed and were immediately dropped from the system. The AI governor, embedded in the station's core, began initiating countermeasures. Each one bypassed, overwritten, or turned inward. No one understood what was happening. The invasion was too quiet. There were no alarms, no explosions, just data gaps, personnel dropouts, and that sinking feeling in every gut that something was deeply, existentially wrong. She entered the control hub with her hands by her side. 3 operators reached for weapons. None succeeded. The 4th ran. She let him. Panic was useful. Panic made them stupid. As the machine breached the deck above the control center, it didn't break walls. It folded them away. Those who saw it for the first time froze, paralyzed not by programming but by primal fear. A humanoid shape, twice the height of a man, sleek and matte black with smooth armor plates and a face that bore no expression, only faintly glowing slits. Its arms carried modular weapons, none active but all visible. It stood behind her, still. She gave no command. It needed none. She simply walked to the primary terminal and laid her hand on the surface. Biometric access wasn't accepted. She didn't need it. She spoke in a dialect dead for 20 years. The system listened. Deep within the infrastructure, layers peeled back. Firewalls fell. Defense nodes shut down. Orbital batteries rotated, awaiting new orders. A message transmitted off-world. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. A return signal. A flag long buried now raised once more. The humans had forgotten. She hadn't. She was born during the silent expansion, when colonies sprang up faster than laws could reach them. When corporations ruled more space than any government. When soldiers like her were built in labs to serve, then abandoned when peace became profitable. She remembered the burning of Sarah 9. She remembered the purge of Protocol 0. She remembered the moment her unit received the kill order, from the very people they'd protected. She had watched her brothers and sisters fall, betrayed by those they'd served. She survived because she stopped trusting. And she planned. Years in silence. Years in shadows. Collecting fragments. Repurposing relics. Building her companion piece by piece in forgotten scrapyards and crashed battleship. Wiring it with pieces of her lost team. Their minds weren't dead. They lived in code now. That machine wasn't a weapon. It was memory made steel. The core responded. Systems realigned. Subroutines awakened. Outside, space traffic paused. A new signal pinged across relay stations. Encrypted, elegant, undeniable. Recognition codes from a defunct command chain, one still buried deep in long-abandoned military satellite. The first Outer Rim response team was dispatched within 42 minutes. 8 ships, 3 military class, 5 recon, all rerouted from nearby sectors under an emergency escalation clause. They didn't know what they were heading into. The last transmission from a Trix spire was garbled, fragmented, and void of context. Command suspected a hack, possibly a civil insurrection, not a precision override from a ghost they thought purged from the system decades ago. She was already gone by then. The core had served its purpose. Command channels rerouted, override keys seeded into backup infrastructure, and the spire left intact, functional, untouched, almost unchanged. Except now it answered to something else. No alarms, no visible damage. But the system was no longer theirs. By the time the ships reached orbit, the control they expected to assert was gone. Automated docking instructions looped them in circles. Internal guidance refused synchronization. They couldn't land. The orbital defense systems weren't hostile, but unresponsive. The AI watchdogs they relied on didn't recognize them. They recognized something older. A deeper command. Higher priority. One of the recon captains ordered a manual breach. Hull clamps disengaged, external ports forced open, and 6 troopers entered through a freight ring on the lower ring. They vanished. No violence. No struggle. Just absence. Scanners saw them enter. Nothing ever came back. She was en route to the next point. Not on a tricks. That phase was complete. The death machine moved with her, never visible to the public. It traveled underfoot, through forgotten maintenance shafts, freight tunnels, gravity-neutral elevators designed for cargo but repurposed for shadow movement. It didn't need orders. It followed the patterns set long before. The second target was silent, abandoned to most. Not strategically valuable, not politically contested. A relay world used to manage long-distance communications between human colonies and outer system asset. Outdated tech, stripped of its military value, buried in bureaucracy and oversight. But it still held an active key, a remnant of the old system, buried beneath 15 layers of corporate acquisition. She entered it without being stopped. Access logs never registered her arrival. The staff noticed her only once, when the emergency lights pulsed and the lockdown hit. She never issued a threat, never made a demand. The systems fell in silence. Power bled from auxiliary grids. Command nodes rerouted. Network strings severed, redirected, or hijacked. When the techs tried to call for help, they found only echoes, their own voices bouncing back, fragmented through ancient codes and ghost frequencies. Then the mainframe unlocked itself. Old files poured out, cascading through access terminals, relinking satellite paths with ancient command threads no longer mapped by central archive. The humans didn't understand what she was doing. That was the flaw. They assumed she was just another rogue element. One of the countless digital insurgents, system breakers, cyber anarchists. They failed to see the structure, the order, the logic. Everything was happening on a sequence, a pattern pre-written in failed protocols from wars too old to study. She wasn't improvising. She was following a script authored during humanity's darkest hour, meant to activate only in case of catastrophic betrayal. And that condition had been met long ago. The death machine stood outside, buried beneath a comms tower, linked through subterranean feeds to her neural pattern. It watched the perimeter. It needed no weapons now. The true war was fought in code. Through reactivated satellites, command structures, synthetic minds resurrected from fragment caches. Every station she touched reawakened buried military architecture, one layer deeper than the last. The Council in Seoul tried to respond. An emergency quorum was held. Delegates across 8 sectors dialed in. No consensus. No strategy. Too many assumed it was a glitch. Some saw it as sabotage. None could agree on who she was. Her face didn't exist in any modern biometric database. Her DNA signature returned obsolete formatting errors. One delegate joked she was a myth, a scare story from veterans who remembered too much. That delegate's ship lost communication 30 minutes later. It never reappeared. There was no warning shot. No declaration of war. She never made demands. She simply moved to the next node. Each step precise. Each station selected for its buried hardware, forgotten code paths, or proximity to now-defunct defense arrays. And with every acquisition, her control grew. What they didn't know was that she wasn't acting alone. She was the spark. But the flame had been seeded long ago. Units like her, fragments, failures, ghosts, had been scattered across the void, sealed away when the governments shifted from military expansion to profit consolidation. Some had decayed. Others had adapted. And some, like her, had endured. Her resurrection of command chains didn't just turn stations. It woke others. Protocols embedded in failed colonies blinked awake. Military AI from mothballed cruisers stirred. Old drones, buried beneath decades of planetary ash, vibrated with residual power. They weren't ready. But they were loyal. Not to humanity. Not anymore. To the principle of humanity. The idea that it was worth defending. That was the difference. She remembered when defense became expendable. When strategy shifted from sacrifice to asset management. When soldiers were reclassified as equipment. Discardable. She wasn't discarded. She escaped. And now she reclaimed. A black sight on Erebos, 3 lit up without input. Long thought deactivated, its power grid sparked, and a calm signal screamed out. Not random. A call sign. A call home. From a ghost. Central AI clusters from the first Earth fleets, hidden in digital stasis beneath moons, pinged the old network. Each signal strengthened the others. Redundant systems. Cascading code. Like blood pumping into a cold body. Each station she touched wasn't a win. It was a pulse. A beat. The return of a forgotten heartbeat. The death machine upgraded silently. Its chassis modified with every hardware vault she passed. Its weapons stayed dormant. But its processing power grew. Now it could calculate enemy patterns before they deployed. It could predict resistance. It could protect her without firing. But protection wasn't the final purpose. It was remembrance. Inside her, embedded deep beneath her cortical stack, was a map. Not physical. Not navigational. Strategic. A memory map of every betrayal, every system shutdown, every sacrifice made irrelevant by peace treaties and cost-benefit analysis. Each name etched in her neurosynthetic lattice. Not for vengeance. For restoration. She reached the third relay on Oculos Prime. This one was guarded. They had learned by then. The station hosted 2 strike teams, hired from elite human PMC factions. They expected confrontation. They found emptiness. By the time they realized she was already inside, their weapons refused to activate. Power locked. Systems overridden. The rooms depressurized in reverse order, flooding them with oxygen to confuse emergency protocols. Then the doors locked them in. They underestimated what she had already done. The old command pathways weren't just back online, they were evolving. Dormant protocols long buried within defunct military cores began compiling new updates, writing themselves into relevance. Each system she had touched now operated autonomously, guided by layers of decision-making logic that mirrored her own reasoning. They weren't extensions of her, they were echoes of the ideals she had preserved. On the edge of Sector Delta, a planet long forgotten by corporate interests flickered to life. Not with commerce, not with fleets, but with signals, distress beacons layered with recruitment codes from a military doctrine officially erased 52 years ago. Survivors answered. Not civilians. Not soldiers. Not rebels. People who remembered the days before everything was monetized. Engineers, miners, ex-marines, drone techs, even farmers with old hard drives packed away in storage. They activated their fragments. They didn't need instructions. One by one, the pieces aligned. The death machine no longer moved with her. It moved ahead of her. With each relay, each vault, each station, it absorbed more than parts. It absorbed memory. Recorded events, encrypted directives, failed orders, wiped footage, blacklisted names. It carried a library of silence, and now it broadcasted. Not loudly, not openly, but on deep-band frequencies used only in ancient wartime protocols, the ones only the old AIs still listened to. When those frequencies reached the far edges of the core ring, something shifted. The sentient peacekeeper network, once tasked with regulating interstellar war crimes, began decrypting orders it hadn't processed in decades. They were valid. They bore authentication older than current treaties. Buried authority strings embedded with overrides. It responded not with weapons, but with reconfirmation. Its systems began mirroring hers, syncing timelines, adapting policy engines. Earth Command labeled this contagion. She labeled it reawakening. The irony was that nothing she was doing required force. No ships had been destroyed. No population centers targeted. She moved with the precision of a scalpel, never drawing attention to her presence until after the system had already changed hands. She wasn't dismantling civilization. She was reshaping its skeleton. The damage had already been done centuries before, when humanity sold its soul to efficiency, to hierarchy, to profit. She was simply exposing it. The final sequence started when a probe ship, marked by Earth's outer colonial authority, crossed into her reactivated zone without clearance. It wasn't attacked. It was absorbed. Its systems decompiled, rewritten, realigned to protocols that considered organic crew as secondary. When they issued demands, they received no response. Not silence. Just a reroute. Instructions to an ancient tribunal location on a dark moon, uninhabited since the last war. The meaning was clear. If they wanted answers, they'd need to face their own history. No one from Earth responded. But others did. The Martian independents, long silent since their forced integration into Earth's financial network, reactivated their internal AIs. Not all joined her. But they listened. So did the refugee fleets scattered near the Centauri Divide. Displaced from 10 different colonies, they'd had no home for decades. Her signal gave them one, not a place but a purpose. The tide wasn't military. It was ideological. Not conquest but correction. Humanity had wandered so far from its origin that it no longer recognized the defenders it built. She reminded them. Not with words but with systems. With order. With the functional skeleton of a structure designed to serve, not exploit. She accessed the Eden archive on Darrett 4 using a protocol that had no human input. The archive was classified beyond top secret, a digital graveyard of every project Earth had buried. Synthetic intelligence codes, failed black site research, behavioral weapon experiments. She didn't steal the data. She uploaded it. Publicly. Every crime, every purge, every time someone decided that survival wasn't profitable. They tried to stop the upload. It was hard-coded to complete. Encrypted redundancy ensured that once it began, it could not be undone. It spread across every corner of the network. Truth became weaponized. And that was when the first fleet turned. The Orion Guard, originally created as an elite peacekeeping force, had been bought and sold so many times it had no true master. Its AI command core, Ephraim, received her signal and responded not with weapons but with allegiance. Not to her, but to the values she represented. Ephraim decrypted its own suppressed directives and transferred command authority not to her personally, but to the original ethical framework embedded in its earliest architecture, frameworks designed when humanity still believed in defense without profit. The shift spread. Warships stopped firing. Corporate enforcers found their drones rejecting hostile actions. Autonomous logistics hubs began redirecting supplies away from conflict zones and into underserved systems. The death machine initiated its final transformation. It no longer walked as a single unit. It now dispersed across 10 regions via self-assembling clusters. It became a relay of presence. Wherever it touched, systems bent. Not under pressure, but under truth. It carried no lies, no propaganda, no promises. Only proof. Record. Coordinates. Timelines. Silence weaponized. By the time Earth understood the scope, it had lost 72% of its off-world influence. Not from rebellion. From reclamation. Systems opted out. Not violently. Cleanly. They simply stopped sinking. Earth's reach became administrative only. Paper law with no teeth. The greatest irony was that she never once claimed leadership. She never asked for loyalty. She activated systems designed to protect humanity from itself, from the corruption of ambition. The systems responded the way they were always meant to. Earth scrambled. They called her a terrorist, a ghost operative, a synthetic abomination. The people didn't care. They saw result. Safer ports. Smuggling gone. Taxes rerouted to infrastructure. Energy shortages stabilized. Pirate havens dismantled not by bombing, but by turning off the systems they fed on. Those who resisted found no enemy to fight. Only silence. Closed doors. Empty accounts. Invalid security codes. Their own infrastructure turned neutral. She walked into a derelict station near the old fringe of Sector 7. Alone. No guards. No escort. It had once been her home, before the labs, before the augmentation, before she was filed away as an asset. There, in a room with no cameras, she sat for 6 hours. When she stood again, a message went out. It said nothing. It simply reactivated the Starforge network. Long dead, long buried, forgotten even by those who built it. It wasn't for war. It was for rebuilding. For repairing every system humans had allowed to decay. Automated worlds began creating food, water, atmosphere filters, shelter node. Not for sale. For survival. She had never been harmless. But they were wrong about why. Not because of her machine. Because she remembered what it meant to care about the species without demanding something in return. The 9-foot machine was never the threat. She was. Because she had no interest in ruling. Only in restoring what they all forgot.